I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. Hello, Foxy listeners. Welcome to the show today. Well, you know that my tagline, which I say at the end of every single show, is to have fun. Now, when I also mention networking, that's usually not something that you automatically go, oh, that's fun. Some of you do, I know, but some of you it frightens because we've been having this conversation a lot, not only on the podcast, but on social media. And you guys have been telling me that you kind of feel a little sleazy about it. And I found the person who is going to help answer all of your questions. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you about this subject. It's one of my faves.
So, give us a little bit of background. Why is this a thing that you sort of latched onto? What is your story?
Yeah, so I got into entrepreneurship many years ago. I started out with a paralegal legal consulting business that I just kind of fell into by accident. It's a very boring story that I won't tell you. But after that, I launched my first business that I launched on my own was a coaching business, and that was in 2016. And I was a dating and relationship coach, and I put a lot of time and money and effort into all of the things trying to build my business. I really thought it was going to be, it sounds silly when you say it, but then I have so many conversations with other entrepreneurs that are like, yeah, no, I thought the same thing. Like, I really just thought I was going to be like, okay, I'm a coach. Like, who's ready? Who needs help? Here
Yeah.
we go. Like, you don't really
And the
think
hands would
about,
raise like me, I'm
right?
here. Right. Yeah.
Right. Everyone would line up. Because if you're not like, if well, I wasn't raised by entrepreneurs, I don't have entrepreneurs in my life. I don't really think about the fact that there's like all of these other aspects of business that are required. And so over the years, I learned a lot through a lot of trial and error, through a lot of wasted time and money, mostly on the things that are like, the things we think are going to be like the thing that's gonna
Yeah.
change everything. Like
Yeah.
this course, yes, it's $10,000, but she says by the end of it, I'm going to have her 5-step process to make $10 million in 90 seconds. So what's $10,000, right? And even if it's something like, branding photos or an expensive website or some fancy like CRM system or whatever it is that we think that we need at the time and is like the thing we're missing. When I looked back on my experience building that business, what I realized was none of those things were ever the thing. The thing that consistently made me money and brought me clients over and over again was the relationships that I built and the connections that I made with people. And so when I transitioned into my current business, Powerful Women Rising, a couple of years ago, what I really wanted to do was help women in particular get back to the basics of connecting with people. It's one of the things that we just innately do best. And it has gotten lost, I think.
Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
I just love helping people figure out a way to network that feels good to them because there really is no one size fits all for pretty much anything in business and figure out how to make it a simple and sustainable form of business growth for them.
Right. And I love that you said this because I think so often, and I mean, I've gone through this, bought the shiny thing or, oh, this like, this email marketing system or the way it goes out like looks really good. I've never had anybody ever sign up and fill out. It was like the layout of your newsletter that did it for me.
Right.
Like it was always like, it was you, like I saw you at this event or whatever, right? It was like the personality that always sells it, right? Like, and I was like,
Yep.
my dad used to say anybody can sell anything. Like, you can sell ice to an Eskimo. You just have to get in front of their face and talk to them. And, and I was like, it's true, right? Like, I feel like if I can meet somebody, it makes it super easy for me. But as an adult, I think what a lot of people go through is that like awkward stage, right? Because you're sometimes, and especially, after COVID and going kind of through all of that and distancing and everything, we kind of got into this like weird feeling of like, how do you meet people? Right. And I think that happens in business and in personal life. Like, you're like, do I just stand in a grocery store and wait for somebody who buys stuff like me and then like ask them if they need a friend? So I think that's where people kind of
Do you
feel
need
like,
someone to eat that
yeah,
cheese with?
yeah, that looks like a cart for a lonely person. Did you want to get a coffee? And but I think that people just kind of always feel like I don't know what to do. And there's so much stuff that's online. We were talking about this off air that, trying to make those, to seem genuine, which you're trying to do, I think people just kind of get stuck and go, I feel like everything I do just feels like sleazy and underhanded and like I'm, in a trench coat gonna rip it open and like asking if somebody wants to buy a watch. Like that's just what it
Right.
feels like. So help us out.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that go into that. I think one of the reasons that networking has gotten so weird is because people get really caught up in this idea of who they think that they're supposed to be, how they think they're supposed to present, how they think they are supposed to speak or interact with people or whatever in order to be taken seriously as a
Right.
business owner. And sometimes that's in our heads. Sometimes, especially if you're a newer business owner, that's a lot of like pressure that you're putting on yourself, which is really just another version of your imposter syndrome. But sometimes it's the environments that we're in too, where we feel like everybody is very polished and put together and everybody seems to know what they're doing. And so we feel like we need to put on some sort of facade so that everyone will take us seriously too and see that we are successful and valuable and we know things. And so then we're all showing up in our weird masks and like no one's making an actual connection because everyone's there in their weird mask. So
Right.
part of it is figuring out how to really let your authenticity shine through, how to show up as your true self, and how to accept the fact that that is going to be something that some people love and it's going to be something that some people don't love. And I always go back to there's so much that I did as a dating and relationship coach that is so applicable in business.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I talk a lot about how when I was working with my dating coaching clients and we would be working on their online dating profile, there would be things that we talked about putting on there and they would say, oh, well, I don't want to put that on there because I don't want it to turn people off. And I was like, no, you actually do want to turn people off. Like that's almost just as important as turning people on, for lack of a better way to put it. And it's really the same way in business. Not
Mm,
everybody is going to want to work with you. And if we're being honest, you don't want to work with everybody. So the more you show up as yourself, the more the right people get attracted to that and the wrong people are repelled by that. And that is actually a good thing for you. You
yeah.
don't need to be palatable to all of the people.
And I think that's so true. Like I always say like, the more you're yourself, the more you find your fellow weirdos. Like my husband's like, that's a wonderful way
Totally.
to put it. But as you were saying that, I was like thinking of like I met my husband on a dating app. And we've been together for like 20 some odd years. So like it worked. But like his like header was like Homer looking for his Marge. And I laughed because I was like a huge Simpsons fan at the time. And I was just like, yes. But he was like, do you know how many people were like, nope, nope. Like he was like, it was really hard. I'm like, yeah, you were just waiting for like me. Don't you regret that line now? Because now you've been
It
stuck with
worked
me for
exactly
20
how it
years.
was supposed to.
But I think we get so like, oh, I don't want to be like unpolished. Like you said, I don't want to be unpolished or I don't want to, I'm scared to come across, with my sense of humor or being as, outspoken or even as quiet as I usually am because I don't want people to think like, ugh, I'm trying to
Mhm.
apply to everybody.
Hmm. Yeah. And part of it too, I think, is doing some experimenting and finding the format or the types of events that you feel the most comfortable in, that you feel you can be the most yourself in, because there's a lot of different types of networking. When I talk about networking, I'm really talking about anything that you're doing that gives you the opportunity to connect with another person. So in some ways, going to, if you join a hiking group or join a book club or whatever, that's still an opportunity to network because you're still connecting with other people. And so sometimes for people that is more appealing. Sometimes if you want to do the more traditional like business networking, some people find it much easier and more enjoyable virtually. Sometimes people find it more easily and more enjoyable in person. And then there are a lot of different formats too. Like if you give me a networking event where there's like not really any structure, you just come in and get a name tag and get a drink and mingle for an hour. That's like my worst nightmare. Like I am not the person who is comfortable walking up to a group of people who are already talking and being like, "Hi, I'm Melissa. What's your name? Nice to meet
Yeah.
you." But you take me to an event where it's like, okay, you have the number three. So you sit at that table. You're going to talk to these people about this topic for 10 minutes. And then you're going to move to a different table and talk about a new topic. I could do that all day long. Like that's
Hmm.
much more comfortable for me. So, again, to bring back the dating reference, I have people who have tried online dating. Maybe they did one app and they were like, yep, tried it. It was terrible. Never online dating ever again. Okay, well, there's a lot of different options when it comes to online dating, like a lot. Like there is an app for everyone. There's an online dating app for clowns. So you can find what you're looking for
Oh,
and
I
what
still want to
works
be
for
a
you.
fly on the wall on that one.
I know, I almost signed up. Same with networking events, right? We go to
Right.
one that's like super structured and kind of sleazy and all about like taking attendance and how many one-to-ones did you have and how many referrals did you pass and how much money did you make me and why didn't you make me enough money? And we're like, I am never doing that again, right? But there's so many different
Yeah.
formats and groups and events and things that you really have to keep trying till you find the kinds that feel good to you.
Yeah. And I think that's where, that trial and error thing is sort of, it is almost like dating these networking groups and figuring out like which one is comfortable for you, which one does, sort of feel like you said, you can kind of take off that mask and sort of be yourself. But when
Yeah.
people are like, let's say they found the one that they're going to, I think there's a lot of people, because I get this all the time. People are like, oh, it must be so easy for you. And I'm like, you stick me in a room and it takes me like a good 15, 20 minutes to warm up. And then all of a sudden I look like a chatty Cathy and I'm like going around being like, who needs a cigar, a cigarette? Like, but it takes a bit. Like I'm not as like outgoing and natured as it is, depending on, kind of what the situation is. And I think
Yeah.
what happens a lot is like I don't want to go in as if, I'm that, old-timey Tupperware lady where I'm like, just like hawking my wares and all of a sudden people are like, I don't want the car that you're selling. Oh my gosh, like thank you. Back off. So
Yeah.
are there some things that we can use that can kind of like help us to sort of get our feet wet and like not feeling like we're just walking in with our elevator sales pitch trying to get it, all out?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the first thing with the elevator pitch or the 30-second commercial or whatever we're calling it these days. I would like, if you're listening to this podcast, for you to forget everything that you've ever been taught about an elevator pitch or a 30-second commercial, because that is not how you connect with another human. That is how you appear like a salesy robot. So
Right.
I understand. I'm not saying that you don't need to be able to speak about what you do in a concise manner and in a way that makes sense and gets people's attention and tells them who you're talking to and what problem you solve. Absolutely. But get comfortable talking about what you do in a lot of different ways, talking about why you're passionate about it, telling a story about a recent client win. Like all of those things are different ways that you can convey the same message, but you can do it in a way that shows who you are as a person and why you feel passionate about what you do, as opposed to just like, here's what I sell and here's why you need it and who wants to buy it. So I think that's the first thing, is really getting comfortable talking about what you do and the and what sets you apart from other people in a way that allows people to create a personal connection with you. And a lot of times that takes practice. We were actually just talking about that in the Powerful Women Rising community this morning, because one of the members was saying she went to a dinner and there were two women that she was talking to who were like her ideal clients. She's a wellness coach for midlife women. And they asked her, so what do you do? And she's like, I completely forgot like what I do. She's like, I don't even know what I said, but it was so weird. And I started talking about my part-time job. And then I started talking about this other thing I used to do. And I don't even know what happened. So we were talking about how sometimes like you just have to talk about what you do and introduce yourself over and over and over again and let yourself be weird until eventually it starts to feel more comfortable. I also would say when it comes to creating those connections and kind of taking it to the next level in terms of, yes, you're someone I just met, but like, now what do I do with you? So I always tell people that it's important to remember the purpose of networking. The purpose of networking is not to find clients. A lot of times we think it is, but the purpose of networking actually is to build your network. And there are a lot of different roles that can be filled in your network. There's a lot of different criteria for who becomes a part of your network. And so getting really clear on that will allow you to know who you're looking for and how to connect with them. So here's basically what I mean is that you're going to have people in your network who are like all over social media. And anytime you post something, they're like, oh, I love this. This is the best thing ever. You're the best thing ever. So they're like your social media hype people. Maybe you are going to have people in your network who you can call when it's really hard and everything sucks and you're ready to go get a job at Target, right? Like there's a lot of different roles in your network. But the idea is you're creating a compounding system. So if I launch a new podcast episode today and I've got 100 people in my audience, I'm like, hey, 100 people, here's a new podcast episode, go listen. Super. But if I have a connection with you and you're a part of my network and you also have 100 people in your audience, now that's 100 more people who are going to hear about my new podcast episode that I don't even know. And they're already coming to that podcast episode as warm leads because they know, like, and trust you, and you know, like, and trust me. And what's going to happen? Some of those people are going to hear that podcast episode. They're going to go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. They're going to tell their friends. They're going to tell their friends. They're going to tell their friends. So that's really the goal of networking. And that's how it works for you to be able to build these relationships organically by just getting to know people, learning about them, finding out how you can support them, finding ways to provide value to them. That's how you create that relationship and nurture that relationship so that you have that kind of culture in your network of people who want to share your stuff and support you and talk about you in rooms that you're not in. And that really is the goal.
Well, and I think sometimes people get stuck of going, kind of, wanting to hoard it all to themselves, right? Kind of thing, like out of fear of, if I let this, if I let this go, or I send this person away by saying like, that's not something I do, or I don't have room for anybody right now, or whatever, that they are sort of giving up, potential sales by letting people go. Are you of the mindset, this is the mindset I've of that person you typically will come back to me as if I'm an information booth? Because I've seen it happen too many times where they're like, I'll just go ask Tanya because if she doesn't know, she's got a guy. Like I always try to be the person who's got a guy.
Yeah, same. Yeah, and sometimes it becomes too much. Like I always talk about one of the things people ask me the most is about following up with people that they meet when they're networking. Like, okay, I met her now, what
Right.
do I do? And one of the things that I always recommend is finding a way to provide value to that person. So that could be like maybe we had a conversation and you were telling me that your dog has some issue. And then next week, I find an article that's about the exact thing that you were talking about. And I just send this article to you and say, hey, Tanya, it was really great to meet you at such and such thing. I just came across this article and it reminded me of what we were talking about. Wanted to send it to you in case it's helpful, right? I'm not saying, hey, I want to sell you my thing. I'm not saying like, hey, do you want to be on my MLM team? I'm not saying any of that. I'm just telling you like, hey, you were important enough when we met that I remembered you. I remembered what you talked about. And I cared enough to take this time to send you this article that might help you. And so what I was starting with was like sometimes that can become too much where people think like, oh, I'm just going to keep coming to you for value.
Right.
And I am always encouraging people on their calendar links to create, like, some people call it like a pick my brain session. Some people call it just like a one-off session where it's like, hey, Tanya, can I pick your brain about how to grow this part of my business? And it's like, you have picked my brain like 94 times and never actually hired me.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely, you can. Here's the link to schedule a pick my brain session, and it's $85 or whatever it is, right? Because there is definitely a balance between like getting what we're worth and still providing value to people and being willing to do that.
Well, and I think you always bump into, into those types of people who, sort of, I hope, never are maliciously sort of abusing the fact that they have access to you, but are abusing
Yeah.
the fact that they have free access to you. And
Yeah.
and if you're very passionate about what you do, it's easy to just like spurt stuff out, right? And feel like, oh yeah,
Right.
here, blah blah blah. Like this is what the answer is. This is the line you need to look at, right? Where it's like, damn it,
Yeah.
that was like worth money, right? We forget that.
But I think generally those people are the exception and not the rule.
Yeah.
I think for the most part, when you are selflessly providing value to other people without expecting something in return, they just naturally want to reciprocate the favor.
And
And
I think
so
that's a
that works really well.
key thing for people to hear, though, because I think a lot of people, like we had mentioned before, kind of go in to networking with the frame of mind of like, who is going to become my client in this room? Whereas I like how you said it's like, who can I provide value to in this room? And sort of changing that dynamic that it's not about adding to your client roster.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what so we've kind of picked an event that we've wanted to go. We've sort of, we've opened our mouth and figured out what we want to talk about. Is there a way, like, how do you know when to sort of let somebody go? Because I think sometimes what happens is we keep trying to, we're sort of gluttons for punishment and we keep trying to like make a connection work. Is there a time that, or something maybe that we should watch out for where it's like maybe it's like kind of time to move on?
Yeah, I think, I mean, sometimes you'll just know if this is someone who you have gone out of your way to provide value to, and they have not reciprocated that, or maybe they just haven't even like expressed any appreciation for it.
Right.
Then sometimes after a couple tries, you're like, okay, you clearly don't get how this works. Um, I always tell people too, like, don't feel like you have to create connections with everyone who was at the event or everyone that you talked to. Like, it's okay if there are people that you meet that you don't want to take the relationship with further, right? So again, for the online dating analogy, it's like you don't have to message every single person who's on the app. And you
Right.
don't have to go on a date with every single person that you exchange messages with. Each step is you deciding, is this person someone that I want to get to know better? Is this someone that I want to put more time and effort into? And it's the same thing in networking. So we might meet at an event and I think like, oh, she's really funny. She seems like we've got similar values. She has an audience that's similar to mine, but we don't do the same thing. Like all of those are great criteria for me to get into my network. So then I say, hey, I would love to chat with you and get to know you better. So we have a Zoom. The Zoom is great. I and you get to decide after that Zoom, is this somebody that I want to get to know more? Do I want to take this to the next level? And so at any point in that relationship, you can decide, like, yeah, this is actually as far as we're going to take it. And so I think there's specific things to look for. I think sometimes it will become clear to you that your values are not aligned. And sometimes that just comes out in conversation where they mention something about a sales call they did that morning and how it
Right.
went, or you talk to them about what some of their long-term goals are in business and they share something that you're like, that's not even on my radar as a goal. Like that's the opposite of what I want. So sometimes it's not that they're bad people or that they're not good at relationships. Sometimes it just becomes clear that they're not aligned with you. and don't necessarily need to be a bigger part of your network. And I always tell people my favorite line that I use is, I don't have the capacity for that right now. I will let you know when that changes. And I use that, and I recommend everyone use that for anytime someone wants to connect with you or they want to take the relationship to the next level, but you're not interested for whatever reason. And even if it's just like, I don't like her vibe. Like,
Right.
I don't know what it is, but every time she talks, I want to run out of the room. Like, that's okay. Um, and and I think I like that response because it allows you to be honest, right? Like, I really don't have the capacity, whether that is time or energy, or like I have one nerve left and you're already on it. But I also like to say, I will let you know if that changes, so that it's like a don't call me, I'll call you thing.
Right.
Uh,
Without just kind of girl like being like, girl, you bit much.
Right. Because if you say like, oh, I have a really busy week right now, right? Then they're like, oh, that's no problem. Do you want to set something up for April? You're like,
Yeah.
okay, actually, I have a busy April. Actually, I have a very busy 2025.
Yeah.
Actually, this is a very busy decade for me.
I'm looking into 2030.
So I don't have the capacity for that right now. It's not something that people can argue with. And you just say, I will let you know when that changes. And that can be used at any step along the relationship when you've decided that it's not something that you want to take further. And you don't have to feel bad about that, because
Yeah.
people are deciding that about you all the time. And this is just how life and relationships work.
Yeah. But I think that's really hard and I'm glad you're saying it because I think that's really hard for people. Like, I mean, it took me over 20 years to be able to say to somebody like, I don't want to work with you. And to be like, and now I'm just like, the older I get, the more brutally honest I have become. I am like so looking forward to being an old lady where I can just like speak my mind and they'll be like, that's just grandma, she's weird. But like it took me a long time because I very much my personality of being like outgoing and like saying it as it is very attractive to sort of introverted, very quiet people. Because they see me and they're like, oh, like I want to be around that. But there are some that I've just learned that I'm like, I will literally chew you up and spit you out, and you're gonna end up being crying. And I don't want to do
Mhm.
that because I understand that what I do is very harsh and some people can't take that.
Mhm.
And I am incapable of,
Owning
being
it
like,
down.
you're pretty, it's okay, I still love you. Like I'm just like, get up, let's go. Like it's time to run another mile, like right. But it's a hard thing to do to kind of like, because I think for the longest time for me personally, I felt bad, kind of
Mhm.
saying, right. I wasn't looking at it as I really am trying to do them a favor. It's not because I'm trying to be cocky myself. I'm trying to save you.
Yeah. Well, and it's also just setting boundaries, and setting boundaries is for you and it's also for them, right? Like if I ask you if you want to have a Zoom with me tomorrow so we can get to know each other better, and on the inside you're like, I would rather stick nails in my eyes, but on the outside you're like, oh yeah, that'd be great. Well, you're wasting 45 minutes of my life having a Zoom with you, letting me think that you are actually interested in creating some kind of a relationship with me. And you think you're doing that just to be nice, but like having a Zoom with somebody or a coffee with somebody that you don't actually want to
Mm.
talk to is really not that nice.
Right. Right. And that's a really great way to think of it. Because I think we don't think of that. We say, oh, just nice. I'll kind of throw her a bone sort of thing. My husband is
Yeah,
one of those people. I always laugh anytime somebody comes to the door. I'm like, you're not allowed to answer the doorbell anymore. Because
same,
he'll listen to like every sales pitch, whereas I'm just like, thank you. Like I'm good. Go with God, or not
same.
interested in your books or whatever. Like I'm not rude
Yep.
about it, but he like feels so bad. So he will listen to the entire like
Yes.
feel of it all, right? Like
Yes. In
you need
fact,
to.
I had this conversation with my husband once about one of these people because he went and answered the door. They had this big long conversation about something we didn't want. It was like a security system or something. And then he's
Yeah.
like, I told him he could come back tomorrow to like do something presentation. And I'm like, why would you tell him that? He's like, I don't know. I was trying to be nice. I was like, you know what's nice? Not wasting his time, letting him come back and do a presentation to somebody who's never going to buy his security system.
Right.
Like, that's not that nice.
I know. It sounds like we have the same husbands because mine does that. I
We
was like,
might.
that was a 30-minute conversation. And he was like, I just felt so bad because he was like an older gentleman. He had his little granddaughter with him. I'm like, great. Are you joining the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Because I've never known you to go to church in the entire time we've been together, less when you got baptized with our son and when we got married. And at Christmas when you like to sing carols. So, like, I just feel like you totally wasted 30 minutes of that man's life. Somebody else probably needed to be saved. Like, how rude of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, exactly. And to go back to the networking example, it's like if you don't want to make a connection with that person, there is somebody who does.
Right.
And so let them go make a connection with somebody who wants to make a connection with them. Like again, with the online dating analogy, there is someone out there for everyone.
Even clowns. I
Exactly,
love that. I did
especially
not know that.
clowns.
So where, I think one of the other problems that people come towards is that they don't know where to go to search to find good networking events because they're like, I don't know, like I see some, but like I don't know how to get my foot in the door, or like I'm not too sure. Are there places that you know of, or that you're like, here's some things to use when you're looking in whatever area they happen to be in?
Yeah, I think Eventbrite can be a really good one. I found some good virtual events on Eventbrite. I host my virtual speed networking event on Eventbrite and get really good results from that. So that is a good option. I mean, sometimes it's just posting in a Facebook group and saying, "Hey, what networking groups do you like, or what women's groups do you like?" Or maybe if you're looking, like maybe you're in the health and wellness space, and so you're looking to see like, are there any local groups of people who work in the health and wellness space or whatever it is that you're looking for, and just kind of get some community opinions. That's really how I got started in 2019 when we moved from northern Colorado to southern Colorado. I was like, I need to start networking, and I don't know why, but I know that I do. And so I just started posting in Facebook groups like, I'm new here, I don't know anybody, I want to make friends, but I also want to build my business. Invite me to all of your things. And people invited me to groups, they invited me to book clubs, they invited me to dinner parties, and I just went to them. And some of them I was like, this is great. And some of them I was like, I won't do this again. And I will say too, for people who are listening, I am an introvert and I am generally pretty shy around people that I don't know.
Mhm.
So I think that's important to mention, because when I say this, like people invited me to their things and I went and it was so awesome. Like a lot of people listening are like, oh my God, that gives me hives just to think about.
Yeah, I would have
And I
massive
was the
anxiety.
same way. Like I sign up for these things and then I get in the parking lot and I'm like, why did I sign up for this?
Yeah.
I am a fool. But very much like the gym, if I can make myself go in, that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I'm almost always glad that I did it. Even if for no other reason, I'm like, okay, well, now I know I don't want to go to that thing again. Um, and I also really like taking friends with me. Like if you have a buddy
Mhm.
who wants to make friends or who wants to network more, is trying to build her business, whatever it is, start going to stuff together, because it is so much easier to walk into a room full of people that you don't know with someone that you do know than it is
Right.
to do it by yourself.
Well, and I think it's, we oftentimes will look at other people, because I get this a lot when I'm speaking on stage. Like people come and go, God, like I wish I could do what you do because it's just so natural. And I'm like, oh, I'm almost throwing up backstage before I get on every single time. And it doesn't matter
Yep.
that I've been doing it over a decade, right? And until I get that first laugh, like I'm like, oh my God, they hate me. This is horrible, right? If I can get a laugh or if I can make somebody giggle, then usually like I'm like, okay, it's okay. I got this. And then I can
Yep.
go, right? But I think like, so I always try to remember that when I'm going, there are so many other people that are in this room that are super nervous right now, just as I am. Like I have to try to remember that, just because they look like, everything is fine and they're having a great time, like at some point they felt like, oh my God, why am I doing this? Like you said in the car going,
Yes.
this was a mistake. I'm just going to go home and get into pajamas. It's safe
Yes,
there.
absolutely. And that's the other thing I recommend too, is if you do go by yourself, when I first walk in, I'm always scanning the room, one, to see, is there anybody I know here? But two, is there anybody who is here by themselves who looks incredibly nervous and uncomfortable because
Right.
that's the person I'm going to go talk to. And not only because I'm a compassionate human being, but the bonus to that is you have now endeared yourself to that person forever. Like that person is in your network, whether you want them to or not, because you just saved them in your time of need and saved yourself too, right? Because now you don't have to stand there by yourself.
Yeah. And it's so true. I like that's a fantastic strategy because there always is somebody like,
Always.
yeah. So
Yep.
talk to us a little bit more about the group that you have. Who is it geared towards? Because I think there might be some people who are like, what about your thing? Can I
Yeah.
come to your thing? So,
Yeah. So I host a monthly virtual speed networking event that's for female entrepreneurs. And it's kind of like I say it's like the appetizer for actually joining the Powerful Women Rising community, which is my group. I also have people who have come to the virtual speed networking event every month for the last year and a half and don't join the group, and that's cool too. But the Powerful Women Rising community is an online community for female entrepreneurs that really want to grow their business with the support of other women. And they want to do it in a way that they want to do it, in a way that feels good to them, not in a way that is just like following the cookie cutter advice and the here's my 5 steps to whatever, whatever. Um, and we have a mix of networking calls. We have mastermind calls, like true mastermind calls, where you bring your challenges and everyone helps you work through them. We do co-working calls. We do a lot of different things in the community. And one of the reasons for that is that I wanted to create a space where the relationships would happen naturally and organically so that you don't have to have 50 virtual coffee chats in order to know everyone who's in the group and in order to create connections with them. You show up to the calls, you get your work done, you do the networking call, you go to the mastermind and actually like work on your business. And at the same time, you're creating connections with these people. You're learning more about them and their businesses. They're learning more about you and your business. And it makes you such better referral partners for each other too.
yeah. Well, and I love this because I think, like one of my things is collaboration. I mean, I wrote the book on it. I like talk about it, but to do that, I always tell people, you got to talk to people. Like networking is such a key thing for that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do stuff by yourself, and especially when you are owner operator, you're kind of wearing all of the hats or there's only a few of you. It can feel really, like you said, it can feel really lonely or feel like I want to create that portion of my network where there are people that I can talk to and go, good Lord, I'm going to strangle, this person or this client or whatever, or like I just can't get over this hump. And I think that
Yeah.
people, do you find that there's a lot of people out there who are just like hungry for that?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, when I first added the co-working calls, we do them every Monday morning now. When I first added them to the community, there were a lot of people that were like, why would we do this? Like, I thought we were here for networking. Like, why would we do co-working calls? And now they're like all about it because even though we're not talking that much, like we do it for 3 hours, we check in at the top of each hour. So we talk maybe for 4 minutes and then everyone turns their camera and their sound off and they go and work. But it just feels so much less lonely. Like you can't see them, you can't hear them, but you just know that they're there. And I think, especially like you said, post COVID, we were in a space where we were like, oh, I went so long without connecting with people. I don't actually need connection. And since then, I think we've moved into a space where we're starting to remember why we need connection and why
Yeah.
we liked it. And actually like want more of that in our lives. And especially as entrepreneurs, we don't have the same opportunities. I mean, I don't know. I feel it a lot not having children too, because where do you meet friends? You meet friends at work or you meet friends at your kids' school. You make
Yep.
friends with your kids' friends' parents. And so it's like, who am I supposed to talk to? Who am I
That's
supposed to
how you end
connect
up
with?
in the grocery store looking in people's stuff
Exactly. Exactly.
because it happens
You can
afterwards
talk to
too.
your spouse, you can talk to your mom, but as an entrepreneur, I think there are things about this that other people just cannot understand,
Yeah.
no matter how hard you try to explain it. And so having a group of people who really get it, um, it goes a long way. It's huge.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes, a lot of the times, it's easier to have those conversations with people that don't have an investment in whatever it is that's going on. Like, I love my mom and I know I can talk to her about absolutely everything, but I also know that she's a big fat liar. Because like she thinks I can do anything. Like I could go to her tomorrow and be like, Mom, I'm like building a rocket with like Elon Musk. And she'd be like, that's so exciting. I always knew you could do something like that. Like
Oh, I
just,
love her.
which I love it. I absolutely adore it. And she will kind of go, you're crazy. You need to stop doing this. Like you need to just kind of calm down. But she's just like that cheerleader, right? Which is great. But
Yeah.
sometimes I need the person who's like, wait, what? No, that's crazy. Don't do that.
Exactly. Yeah. This is why we have lots of roles to fill in our network
Yeah.
because we do need the person that's like, yes, you can do all the things. And we need the other person that's like, maybe not all the things
Yeah.
today.
Maybe just let's put those on until Friday and see how we feel about it then.
Yeah, exactly.
So, where is the best place for people to go? Because I know there's a lot of them that are probably sitting out there and kind of going, yes, like I want to do this because I think I've been hearing it more and more of people just wanting authenticity back. They don't want to do, taking all of the photos and doing all of the dances and all of that, kind of other stuff that seems to have like overtaken. They're like, it's exhausting. And I just want to get to a point where I can be like, this is who I am, this is the unfiltered version of me in all ways.
Yes.
So how do they go and find your unfiltered networking group?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place is my website, powerfulwomenrising.com. If you go to the events section, that's where you'll find information about the virtual speed networking events. If you go, there's a page about the community where you can learn more about joining the Powerful Women Rising community. You can learn more about my podcast on there, all of the things, probably more than you even wanted to know about me on the website, powerfulwomenrising.com.
So let's talk just a little bit before we go about your podcast. So we're going to make sure that we have a link specifically to that. But what made you decide to want to start a podcast, and what are some of the latest topics that you've talked about?
So I had a podcast when I was a dating and relationship coach. That was my first one. It was called Love Starts Here. And it still some weeks gets more downloads than my current podcast. And it always just pisses me off.
I have
But
a
it was
YouTube channel for an old craft store that does that too. I'm like, why
what
are
the
people still watching this?
I know. I mean, I love it. It was a great podcast, and I think I did almost 90 episodes of that one. So when I started my new business, I kind of went back and forth with whether I wanted to do a podcast or not, and ultimately I decided that I wanted to because I really wanted to. I get really frustrated when I listen to podcasts and they don't ask the questions that I want them to ask.
Mm.
So when the host is like listening or asking somebody a question, you're great at this. But a
Oh,
lot
well,
of
thank
times
you.
hosts will ask a question and the person is like, oh, well, you just have to do X, Y, and Z thing. And it's like, okay, so how do you do X, Y, and Z? But
You just have
the
to
host
find
is
your
just like,
ideal client. That's the one that
yeah,
always
but the
irks
host is
me.
just like, okay, great, everyone go do that. Bye
And they're
bye.
like, no, I don't know what that is.
Right.
Right.
So I kind of was like, I mean, this is exactly how I ended up starting my virtual speed networking event too, because I couldn't find what I was looking for.
Right.
And so I invented it. And so I kind of did the same thing with the podcast. So initially, I wanted it to be an opportunity to showcase other female entrepreneurs and their expertise and to create it as sort of a library of various topics that would be of interest to other entrepreneurs. So it's not like you have to listen to them in order. You just would scroll through and look for like, oh yes, this is what I want to know about right now. And then about a year ago ish, I hired a podcast coach and she was like, why are you spending so much time making commercials for other people? And I was like, what? And so she was like, you got to start doing some solo episodes. And I was like, do I really? Like, are you really sure I do? But it's been really fun because now I get to do a mix of my solo episodes are almost always about something related to networking. And then my interviews are about all different kinds of areas of expertise. I just had a really good one that was about how to create content that actually connects with people, like on a human level. I have ones that are about, um, I have one about LinkedIn. I have ones about time management. I have interviews about starting a membership. I have interviews about starting a podcast. all different kinds of things, like whatever I think is of interest to women who are growing businesses is I'll interview those peeps.
Yeah. And it's fun to do. Like to me, I used it originally because I was just like, I want to talk to people. Um, and I remember when I first started, I was like, I want to start a podcast. And my husband was like, what the hell is that? And I'm like, it's like talk radio, I guess. And then he was like, yeah, if talking's involved, you're fine. You'll be good.
Yeah, you'll be
I was
great.
like, thanks for the vote of confidence. Like it's and I'll give a shout out to my husband because every now and then somebody gives it back to him. It was like, she talked about you on the show again. Then he listens. Like he does promote every time he talks to somebody. He was like, you got to go and listen to my wife's podcast. I'm telling you right now, people, that man has not listened to an episode. Like
I love it.
he
Well, neither
hawks
has
it.
your mom, and she's
Yeah.
still like,
She
Tanya,
does,
this is
though.
the best. You should have a podcast.
I will say my mom does, and she will send me notes. It's the funniest thing. I was like, I should just do like a side podcast on my mom, like sending me notes. Like she was like when I first started, it was so funny because I would get a text message like the day after I released an episode, and she would be like, it was good, but you told this story and you've told this story before, so you need to
Oh my
just
gosh,
like
that's my
let that
mom
one
too.
go, right? And I was like, thanks, mom.
My mom usually doesn't even start with "it's good" though. She's my proofreader, and so I will just get a random text from her that's like, you have a typo on line 2 of your Facebook post. I'm like, okay, but was it a good post? Did you like the picture? Nothing?
No,
Just a
fix the typo.
Thank you.
That's
I can't wait for your mom to send you a note telling you that she heard you call her a big fat liar on this episode. FYI,
She
Tanya's
will.
mom, I didn't say it.
She will. She watches the ball. It's so funny. But it's like she'll be like, did you see my like because she didn't know what they were. I put it on her phone and everything. And then she started watching it on YouTube. But it like, God bless her. She's so cute. Cause she was like, did you see my number? Did you see my tick? And I'm like, what tick, mom? And she's like, I watched the show. Did you see my tick? And I'm like, well, I don't look for the tick. She's like, look for my tick. And I'm like, well, it doesn't like roll and then say mom.
Right?
So now I
Oh my
just, yeah,
God.
I'm gonna give myself away, mom. There's no tick. I just, yeah. Yeah, I just go, yep, saw it. But like
That's
you said,
awesome.
we need those people in our network,
Totally.
right? She lifts me up, but keeps me humble at the same time. It reminds me where I
Yep.
came. Well, Melissa, it has been just an absolute pleasure chatting with you. We're going to make sure we have all of the links of where you can find her. You can follow her, also find the Powerful Women Rising, learn more about the groups and the networking. And I'm really excited to check it out too, because it's one of the things that I know I was like, God, I got to get it back out into the world. I have to talk to people again, I guess, and be personable. So
Yeah. Well,
I think
virtual is real. I always tell people virtual is a lot easier because if it's awkward or you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be here, or what is this conversation? You're just like, oh, I have a bad connection. Really sorry. Bye.
yeah.
You can't
I
do that
know
in the
my
middle of a
camera's
coffee
just not
shop.
working. Yeah. I remember being at one event and just seeing a lady like just walk out of the room and I was like so curious. So I followed her to the hotel and I was like, "Sorry, can I just ask why you left? Like you seem to be having a really good conversation." She was like, "I was just done." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "So you just walked away?" Like it was years and years ago. And I was like, "You just walked away?" And she goes, "Yeah, like if you don't want to be part of our conversation, you can just leave the conversation." It was
Wait, you
like
can just do that?
you can just like turn around and walk away. I was like, what? She goes, yeah, like try it out with your family. Like if you're just having a conversation with your family, like just walk out of it if you're like not a part of it or what. Like don't be rude about it, but
Yeah.
just leave. And I remember for like years I would do that. And I was like, this is the most empowering thing. Like that was so powerful to me that I was like, I can just walk away from and most of the time they didn't notice that I was gone anyway. But you know,
Right.
the ego gets in the way and you're like, they'll notice if I'm all of a sudden not there and be like, why
Everyone
did she
will.
walk away? They're too busy.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was really, really fun.
So just before you go, I'm going to put you on the spot for a little bit. If there's one, can you give us one of the best tips that you have for networking and one thing that people should avoid at all costs?
Oh man. Okay. The avoid is super easy. Well, it's hard to narrow it down to one. You and I were talking. I always tell people that I teach people how to network like a human and not like a salesy weirdo. And everybody's got something that automatically comes to mind when I say salesy weirdo. My one of my biggest pet peeves is getting added to someone's email list when I have not been asking to be added to the list. So you go to a networking group, they send out a contact sheet and they're like, oh, here's the people if you want to follow up with them. And now all of a sudden you're like on someone's email list. Don't do that. It makes you a salesy weirdo. And I think the biggest thing with networking is just to remember that it is about connecting with other people. I think when you think of it as like going out to make friends or going out like just with the intention of being curious and learning about people, as opposed to going with the intention of like, I'm going to network to build my business. Like when you go at it that way, you feel bad and you have a weird energy. And if you just go into it like, I'm just going to go talk to people and make friends and learn about people, it feels much better and your energy is much better to be around.
I love that. Those are two perfect ways. So add those to your list, write them down. Melissa, thank you again so much. I look forward to having you on the show, and make sure that you head over to follow her on Instagram and also check out the networking events if you're a woman. Sorry,
Yes.
men, you have to find your own.
There's plenty for you.
It was so amazing to have Melissa on the show. And I wanted to have her in particular because I love the way she talks about how it is about networking and being authentic, being genuinely who you are, and going out to just see who you can meet. Is there somebody else that you can help, that you can offer value to? And that's going to start building your network. And networking isn't something that's like a one and done. You're going to go to one event and you're going to have like an entire roster filled with people. You have to be in this for the long haul. Networking is something that should just be a part of your business for the entire time you have a business. In the 25 years I've had a business, there have any time that I'm like, oh, I need more clients. I need to do this. It always comes back to I've let go of some of my networking. So I encourage you to head out and find at least one event. And of course, we are going to have the link to the one that Melissa has, to go and find somewhere that you can network. And maybe that's a speed networking like Melissa has to offer. Maybe that's in a group setting. Maybe that is doing, like she was saying, find a group of people that you can do a co-working thing with, because that is a great way to sort of feed off of each other and be able to kind of do this journey not by yourself, because you were never meant to do entrepreneurship alone. It is impossible to build a business completely by yourself. It just doesn't work that way. So networking is something that you need to practice, and you can get good at it. But like anything else, you need to practice. You need to learn that anybody can do it. Even if it's something that you're like, I am a complete and utter introvert, there is something that is out for you. Because like she said, if the clowns can have their own dating site, you surely can find a networking event that works for what you feel comfortable with, what feels aligned for you, and that are going to hold the people that you're looking for to add to your network. So I want to hear, what is it that you're doing? What did you try? Did you go to an online event? Did you go to an in-person event? Did you send out some emails to introduce yourself to people? How is it that you are doing the network, and what is your favorite way? And hey, if you're willing to share, tell me those stories that you were like, oh my God, I did this and it was an absolute nightmare, because, shamelessly, I kind of like to hear about those too. So send it all to us so that we can share it with the world, and even promote some of the places that you're finding really good luck at it. Let's share it with other people and get more people that you can network with. So no matter what it is that you're doing today, which I hope that is networking, make sure you take time to have fun, because as I will always say, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?